The search for WWE's most infamous match is over. What's going on, guys? And welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham Jesus and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. And yes, at long last, today we're talking WWE's most infamous match between Bret Hart and Tom Magee. It's a match a lot of people, if not most wrestling fans, thought they would never see until it resurfaced just recently. And it's not difficult to think that, just because the match happened in 1986, and it was an untelevised match that was taped anyway, but people either thought that it wasn't taped or that the tape was gone forever, because this is one of those matches that has been long desired by tape traders and just wrestling fans in general for over 30 years. And of course it wasn't known until years later, until I would say maybe the early 90s, mid 90s, how precious and how prestigious this match would be. Not because it's an all-time 5-star classic. The match in total is 5 minutes. And I'll talk about that at the end of this special, because they do show the match in its entirety just about on this special. They don't show the ring entrances, but they do show the match as it's just starting out and about a minute or so after the match is over, which I'll talk about again at the end of this review. But yeah, it wasn't until just recently that this match gained some more traction after a fan online, Mary-Kate Anthony, who was interviewed for this special, posted a few clips of the match on her Twitter account with people saying, "Oh, that's not the real match, they had a rematch, that can't be it, blah, blah, blah." No, this was the original infamous match between Bret Hart and Tom Magee. And she had it in tape form, transferred it over, and I guess WWE got in contact with her and asked to, use the footage on a network special. Now, I know StarCast is doing something similar this weekend over Double or Nothing weekend in Las Vegas. I think they're not actually showing the match. I don't think they can do that because they don't own the match. It's WWE's match. I don't think they're showing the match, but I do know they're having a Q&A with Bret Hart and Tom Magee. Probably the first time they've sat down and talked to each other since the fucking match, or at least since that time period, over 30 years ago, which is pretty cool. I will be at StarCast, hopefully. There's some, issue with the tickets and all this other shit. I know, I guess you can't buy the tickets until you arrive at the event, which is weird. Did I say this weekend? I meant next weekend. My apologies. It's not this weekend. But, yeah, I will not be attending the Bret Hart Tom Magee Q&A. But I was able to watch this match here, which I was very happy they showed ahead of time. People would think, oh, it's a big fuck you to StarCast. I'm sure that had something to do with it because they are talking about that match at StarCast next weekend. It's not like they're beating StarCast to the punch, because it's not like, I don't think StarCast is showing the match anyway. But there were a lot of people who had possession of this match, including this woman, Mary-Kate Anthony, Harry Smith. I think Cheeseburger said something online, said something on Twitter about owning and watching and having seen the match and whatever. So it was really only a matter of time before WWE did something with the match. And it was really cool how they made this out to be a big deal. And it was only announced a few days ago that they'd be making this into a network special to air after Raw. So to kick off the actual special, we hear Cassius Ohno call it the holy grail of wrestling tape trading, which is true. I've heard a lot of people call this match the holy grail of wrestling tape trading because, again, it's a match a lot of people thought they would never see. It was a match that's been lost now for, again, 30 years. And even now with the network and them, WWE, having owned and having bought every, big match out there, I've seen people speak in the last couple days and talk about on Twitter what is the new holy grail of wrestling, because this is one of those matches that's been talked about for years, but people thought we would never see because by now you would think it would have been lost or that it'll never resurface, but it did in the form of a WWE Network special now, which is really cool. But again, what's the new holy grail of wrestling tape trading? That's, I guess, the new question coming out of this. But anyway, so like I said, the match happened back in 1986. Around that time, Vince was thinking, okay, who's going to replace Hulk Hogan when he's gone? Which I thought was a bit weird because this is at the height of Hulkamania. This was right after their first WrestleMania. Hulk Hogan was still the WWE champion. He would be with the company for another, 7 years before he left in 1993. So it wasn't like it was the early 90s and Hogan was on his way out and they were looking for someone new to replace Hogan. I'm just surprised that they were already looking to replace Hogan even at that point, because he was still at the height of his popularity for another fucking 7 years in WWE. So I thought that was weird, but it's just the facts. So Vince turned to Stu Hart to mold the future of his company in the form of Tom McGee. The guy took number 2 in the World's Strongest Man contest, which is pretty crazy according to Sean Waltman. And Vince took one look at him and was like, this guy is the future. This guy looks like a superstar. And really, he did. If you take a good look at this guy, at first glance, he looks like a superstar. He looks like a guy that you would build your company around until you see him get in the ring and it's like, okay, he's not really that good. But see, I'm not surprised that Vince and even Stu Hart saw a lot in this guy. Not because he was a great worker or anything, but based off his look alone. And the guy had the size, and he had, the build, and he had the voice for like a main event level talent in wrestling. He had everything except the in-ring ability. And the guy was athletic too. It's not like he was a piece of shit in the ring and he couldn't do anything. You'll see in the actual match, the guy could do flippity-doo-dahs like Ricochet could. I thought I was watching a 2019 205 Live match. But I thought that was cool. But beyond that, though, the guy could not really do that much in the ring, and I'll talk more about that a little later on. But the match took place on October 7th, 1986. It was a tryout match for McGee with Bret Hart. They didn't want to put him on TV just yet, which was smart, but this was an opportunity for him to see if, or not just for him, but for WWE, to see if he's worth investing in. Is he really worth the hype? Is he living up to the hype? Is he as good as Stu Hart says he is? So again, it wasn't a televised match, but they did tape it, as they do pretty much all their, I think, a lot of their untelevised matches, they do tape and they hold in the archives, whatever. So before the bell, Bret Hart asked Tom McGee what his top moves were, so he could use them in the match, and Bret Hart can make him look like $1 million. Bret Hart actually said to him before the match, if you do a good job here, they will give you a job. They will give you a fucking contract here at WWE if you can have a great performance in this match. And sure enough, he did. After the match, Vince was blown away. Bret said that he heard that Vince said to someone else that Tom McGee was their next world champion at Gorilla. That's what he said, that Tom McGee was their next world champion. So then McGee was hired, and he stayed there until 1990. So he was in WWE for the next 4 years, and they said here that the footage of this match was never seen again. Soon after that, McGee had a match with Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, and Sean Waltman, who's all over this special. And he, Bret Hart, Cassius Ohno. There's a lot of cool names included in this special that are interviewed about the match and their thoughts on it. Waltman had seen the match with Ted DiBiase. He called that a good match, too. And he said, he actually defended McGee here. He said the guy had potential and that he could have made it. He may not have been like a main event player. He may not have been like a top tier talent. But he could have been a good hand to have in the ring with more time. And working with people like Bret Hart and Ted DiBiase would have gotten him to that next level in the wrestling business. But he needed more time to pick it up. He wasn't like Waltman. It wasn't his dream from like 10 years old to become a professional wrestler. It was probably just something he tried because he thought he'd be good at, because he had the size for it. He had the size for it and the athleticism and maybe even the mic skills to an extent. But he needed more time to adapt to the ring. And he just wasn't given that time. He had a great match with Bret Hart, a great showing with Bret Hart, as did he did with Ted DiBiase. But beyond that, though, he was just that was it. They just kind of gave up on him. And because of that, he didn't really surface to what he could have been. Again, maybe not the next world champion. I think Vince kind of jumped to conclusions there with thinking that McGee was like their next big guy, which he obviously was not. So anyway, Waltman thought that he was going to be introduced on TV the very next week after having these matches with Bret Hart and then Ted DiBiase, and he wasn't. He was nowhere to be seen. He was not ever introduced, I believe, on WWE TV, unless I'm mistaken. But the guy remained with the company for a while after that. Again, through 1990, for the next 4 years, he was in WWE, did a lot of tours. He was on Japan tours. He worked dark matches. But no, that was it for Tom McGee. Unless I'm missing something here, I don't think he ever once appeared on WWE TV, at least not in a meaningful role. Maybe as like a jobber for someone else, but never as someone they ever really built around on Raw or just at one of their shows or whatever. I mean, obviously Raw wasn't introduced until 1993, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway, we hear from Tyson Kidd, and we hear from Harry Smith, who we have not seen here on WWE sanctioned programming in some time. They talk about how Bret played the match one time at his house during a barbecue back in 1996 and 1997 era. And Tyson and Harry remember watching the match. They remember sitting there watching the match. Harry asked Bret for it, like, hey, Brett said, hey, if you come over to my house one time, maybe I'll show you the match in full, blah, blah, blah. He never did. Harry asked every time he went over there. Brett said, oh, I can't find it. I don't know where it is, blah, blah, blah. He knew that he had it, but he was just basically too lazy or just didn't want to go find it. So Harry never ended up getting to see the match. While in developmental, though, developmental guys can actually ask for matches from WWE to watch. I think Cole Cabana actually talked about this on a podcast years ago, about how when he was in WWE developmental, he asked for McGee versus Hart, and they turned him down. And it wasn't a Cole Cabana thing, because Tyson Kidd did the exact same thing, and he never got it. So he figured he would never see the match. And Waltman, on the other hand, thought the footage didn't even exist. People would talk about it like, oh, the footage is out there somewhere, and Waltman's like, yeah, right, that's bullshit. There's no such existence of footage of this match. In WWE, Sam Roberts talked about, who was also heavily interviewed on this special, Sam Roberts talked about how WWE probably had no benefit in keeping it around. Why would they bother keeping the match? If anything, it just showed everyone how big of a failure McGee was and how wrong they were about Tom McGee. So it wouldn't be, it would be easy to assume that WWE would have ditched the match and would have just, not had it in their archives, no longer had it in their whatever, with the rest, in their storage, with the other matches and tapes that they have. Everyone figured that they no longer had it. So then we hear from Mary-Kate Anthony, who talks about how Brett had all of his matches documented from TV on tape, and that Brett's secretary wanted all of those matches transferred from, tape to CD, digital, whatever. So Mary-Kate Anthony is a third-generation fan. She's a wrestling photographer. This is the same woman that put the match on Twitter and was telling people, hey, I have actual footage of the match just recently. So yeah, she's a third-generation fan, wrestling photographer. Her friend worked with Bret Hart. I think her friend might have been that secretary. So they gave Mary-Kate about 50 tapes and took the TV tapes after they transferred them over from tape to CD, digital, whatever. And they told Mary-Kate, hey, just hold on to the tapes. We really have no use for them now that you transferred them to digital. So you can hold on to the tapes. We really don't need them. So she converted the tapes over and kept the tapes. That being said, she didn't know that she had that match in her possession, because Skeptics Online, when she posted pictures of the tape on her Twitter feed and stuff like that, thought she was lying. Because on the actual tape it said, well, first of all, McGee is spelled wrong. It's like McGee, which I thought it was actually spelled too. It's Magee. That's how you spell his last name. But not only that, but there was the wrong date on there too. It was from September of 86 as opposed to October. So people were like, yeah, bullshit, it's not the actual match. But she watched the match, and it's like, holy shit, it's the actual match. This is really the match between Bret Hart and Tom McGee. That's pretty crazy. So after that, people didn't really think it was real. And Anthony didn't know that it was like a holy grail. She had heard about it in Bret's book, and she had known about the match, but she never thought that she would ever have it in her possession. And two, she didn't know how important that match was until people kind of told her about it. And then, obviously, years later, after the match took place in 86, officials realized that Bret Hart, not Tom McGee, was their guy. That Bret Hart would be the guy to take them into the next generation, to build around as the next WWE champion. And as I said before, Tom McGee stuck around. He was, he toured Japan for a while with WWE, did a lot of house show matches in 1989. And then in 1990, they parted ways, and he left the wrestling business entirely. Bret Hart, at the other hand, I think it took him so long, as they were talking about here, Sam Roberts brought this up, that it took him so long to become the top talent that he was, because he was so valuable at making others look good. And Bret Hart did a great job of piecing this whole thing together and making it look like a masterpiece, at least for Tom McGee, because after the fact, when he would wrestle other people, it was pretty obvious that he was not as good as Vince and other people thought he was. So X-Pac, at the end of this, documentary portion of the special, he says, yeah, there's got to be some sort of a demand for a Tom McGee meet and greet, I think there's still people wanting to meet the Shockmaster. I think there's people that would want to meet Tom McGee. And it's funny that he mentions that, because there actually will be a Q&A, not a Q, or a Q&A too, but a meet and greet with Tom McGee at StarCast next weekend. So this is like an unofficial advertisement for StarCast. Obviously, Waltman makes no mention of that. WWE does not mention that. Why would they? But yeah, Tom McGee will be at StarCast, not only doing the Q&A with Bret Hart, but also, I believe, doing a meet and greet. And again, I'm not gonna be meeting him or anything like that. I should be there on the Saturday before the show, before Double or Nothing. But that's pretty cool. So if you're watching this thinking, yeah, it'd be great to meet Tom McGee, it'd be really cool to do a meet and greet because I love this match or I love this story, blah, blah, blah. You can. If you go to StarCast in Vegas, you can meet him, which is pretty cool. So then we finally see Tom McGee. I thought they would not interview Tom McGee. I thought we would have to wait till StarCast to see his face. I mean, I'm sure if you looked him up online, you can find a picture of him modern in present day. I didn't know what he looked like all these years later. Again, this is 30 years later. And the guy looked like a star 30 years ago. Harry Smith talked about meeting him at a gym one time. He was friendly, he was cordial, he was nice, but it was pretty obvious that he had no interest in wrestling anymore. But yeah, we see him here. They actually brought in Tom McGee for this special, which I think is fucking awesome. And he said that he was happy with the match at the time. He remembered it all working. Everything clicked with that match. He remembers flashes of pink, obviously, with Bret Hart's gear and whatnot. Just it was a very fast-paced match, and everything clicked. And he also did not know at that time, or at least not until maybe even this point, when the producer brought it up to him, that he was supposed to be the next Hulk Hogan. Now, people told him about that match and the urban legend regarding how people thought he would be the next big thing and all this other stuff years later. And even that was a while ago, but like probably not until the 90s McGee heard about that. But he praised Bret Hart here. He called Bret Hart an amazing entertainer, and he thanked Bret Hart for giving him a chance to learn at Stu Hart's dungeon, at the Hart Dungeon, for so long before making it to WWE. And he says that he's happy. He's happy that people want to see it. He hopes that people are impressed with the match. And Tom McGee himself, I mean, not all that surprisingly, but he's actually never seen the match. He's like, yeah, I've never seen it. And other than just being there and working the match, I have never seen the match. Bret Hart, I don't know if he said he never... I mean, obviously he's seen it because he fucking owned the match. But Bret Hart here was also interviewed, as I mentioned earlier, and the producer asks him, like, would you want to see the match? And Bret Hart's like, yeah, if someone popped it in for me. And they're like, do you want to watch it right now? And he's like, why not? Like, Bret Hart clearly has, like, no interest. He clearly does not care. But they put it in for him anyway. Tom McGee, same thing. They're like, you want to watch it? He's like, yeah, I'd watch it. So then we see the match. It's only about... the full thing, not just the match, but like they don't show the entrances, like I said. They show the post-match celebration victory for Tom McGee, who, yes, beat Bret Hart, and this was before Bret Hart became a big name. I'm sure well before he became Intercontinental Champion and Tag Team Champion and WWE Champion. This was 86, so I'm not exactly sure where this was in Bret Hart's timeline, whereas, you know, what point in his career this was during his time in WWE. But yeah, the match is only about, I'd say, 5 to 7 minutes in total. It's not a long match. Why would it be? It's a fucking dark match. Why would it be a main event level match? It's fun while it lasts. It's a good match. By no means is it a 5-star classic. So again, if you're going into this thinking it's like, holy shit, like the next Shawn Michaels Undertaker from WrestleMania 25, you gotta temper your expectations, because that's not what this is. The whole purpose of this match was for it not to be a great match, but for how good it made Tom McGee look. And it made him look really, really good. Again, he did some flippity doodads, which was cool. But beyond that, this was a total carry job from Bret Hart. Bret Hart carried him like there was no tomorrow. Like, that's how good of a job Bret Hart did in making Tom McGee look great. The guy, again, had the look of a star. He could talk like a star. I don't know how, how brushed up he was on his mic skills, because we heard a little bit from him here. Not modern day, but like back then. We saw some interviews with the guy. And he was a good-looking guy, again, could talk, had a good voice. He was like 6 foot something. So obviously you take one look at him and Vince would think, oh, the guy's our next world champion. Like, even back then, Vince had the same mentality that he does now with these bigger guys. But yeah, like, the match itself is good. And Bret Hart, it's a typical match. It's very formulaic. Tom McGee gets some shit in early on. Bret Hart is on offense for most of it. So again, it's not that flashy of a match. Tom McGee bounces back. He gets his, hot comeback. And he beats Bret Hart with a roll-up, and you hear the Brain, Bobby the Brain Heenan on commentary, and obviously Gorilla Monsoon. either praising Tom McGee, who had said, oh, you're going to see a lot more Tom McGee in the years to come, which is just hilarious. But yeah, they did commentary for the match, which I thought was interesting, because it was a dark match. It was not televised. It was at a TV taping. I thought we would hear a silent match, but no, you hear Gorilla Monsoon on commentary praising him up the butthole, and then Bobby the Brain Heenan go, I don't know, there's something that just doesn't sit well with me about Tom McGee. There's just something about him I don't like, which is just so funny. And he's like, yeah, he got the tights. And from the angle, it looks like he might have held the tights. And maybe he did. Maybe he was right. I don't know. But Gorilla Monsoon is like, oh, no, he didn't hold the tights. Get over it. Like, he didn't actually hold the tights. Brain, like, move on. He actually, don't shit on him for no reason. It was a funny match from a commentary standpoint. But, yeah, it was a good match. Definitely check it out. The whole special is great. It's about 28, 29 minutes in length. Well worth the watch. Even if you're not, like, big into wrestling tape trading, which I never was. I mean, I grew up at a time where we had DVDs and shit like that, obviously. I've heard about the match many, many times from various different people, and we finally got to see it here. It was cool. Again, it wasn't like the greatest match of all time. It wasn't supposed to be. I think people need to realize that this match is not supposed to be a 5-star classic. If you're going into this thinking it's a 5-star classic for a fucking 5-minute dark match, you're a fool. That's not what this is supposed to be. People looked at this as like Tom McGee's breakout performance, which from an angle, if you didn't know how good Bret Hart was, you'd probably think that. But this is a total carry job from the Hitman. Absolutely. So be sure to check it out, not just for the match, but the entire special. Again, you hear from practically everybody. Tom McGee himself, which is really cool. Bret Hart, Tyson Kidd, Harry Smith, Sean Waltman, Cassius Ohno, a lot of cool people who know what they're talking about here. Sam Roberts, too. I love this. Mary Kate Anthony, the woman who had possession, who was in possession of the tape just recently. So again, you hear from everybody the whole story behind the match and why it's so prestigious and important and sought out after all these years. So especially if you're not familiar with the story, watch the special. It definitely gives you a newfound appreciation for this match and what could have been with Tom McGee. So that was WWE's most infamous lost match from the WWE Network. Be sure to check it out at your leisure under the original specials on the network. But yeah, thanks guys for checking out the video. As always, I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back in the coming days with hashtag AskGSM, Wrestle Rant Radio excerpts, my latest review of Ms. and Mrs., all that stuff in the days to come right here on the channel. So have a great rest of your week, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.